A future leader that is supposed to be equipped to deal with the challenges that the world faces now and in the future needs to know a whole bunch of things. Some of them we teach at business school in traditional education, but many of them we don't. Let's look at some of the more global impacts that business leaders will need to understand in the future. I'm reading here an article by Will Steffen, Johan Rockström, and Robert Constanza called "How Defining Planetary Boundaries Can Transform Our Approach to Growth." What they are talking about is to say, like, okay, let's look at the planet. Let's look at the planet as a safe operating space for humanity. And let's imagine that we need to establish some kind of boundaries that make sure that we continue to live together with the planet within some kinds of norms and terms and regulations that will make sure that this safe operating space will be maintained. And what they are arguing basically is saying that for the last 200 years, since the Industrial Revolution, the impact of human activity on this planet has dramatically changed, and we are today, as we well know, at or beyond some of the boundaries that ensure that the planet can continue to provide us with this safe operating space. What they're highlighting basically is they're saying, well, there are 10 different boundaries or Earth system processes that are critical to make sure that this safe operating space can be maintained. They talk about climate change, rate of biodiversity loss. We're not talking here about a romantic or nostalgic view of losing animals. We're talking here about a whole system approach whereby we do need a diversity of actors, animals, plants, and so forth that do ensure that we as a system, as a complex system, can operate. We talk about the nitrogen cycle. We talk about phosphorus cycle, stratospheric ozone depletion, ocean acidification, global freshwater use, change of land use, atmospheric aerosol loading, and the chemical pollution. Now, what they have tried to do is come up with parameters, and they have made their own assumptions. May they be right or wrong, it's a starting base, whereby they say, like, well, let's look at what was the pre-industrial value on these. Let's look at what we believe, given the current research available by scientists, and I refer to a couple of articles in Nature and in Ecology and Society that were published and established some of the references or the baselines for these. And say, like, and let's look at where the proposed boundaries are, and let's look at where we are today, and then let's try and figure out what solutions we need to establish. And a few critical ones come to mind. I think climate change, it's been today no longer disputed that human activity has caused climate change. Basically, the way they measure this is they say, like, well, let's look at the atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration. We're always talking about parts per million by volume. And they say, well, pre-industrial value was 280. The proposed boundary, this is relatively well documented, should be around 350. Today we are at 387, so we are past the boundary to provide still a safe operating space. The rate of biodiversity loss is a dramatic one. Pre-industrial values was between 0.1 to 1 species per million species a year. Right now we are above 100 species per million of species per year, and the proposed boundary they recommend are 10. So we are currently 10 times higher than where they believe we should be in order to continue to have the planet as a safe operating space for human beings. The nitrogen level used to be at 0. This is much related to how we use agriculture. This is side effects of our agricultural activities. They propose a level of 35. We are at 121 millions of tons of nitrogen per year. The same goes for the phosphorus cycle, where pre-industrial value used to be -1. They propose proposed boundary rates at 11. We are currently between 8.5 and 9.5 at a global level. We're looking at the quality of the phosphorus flowing into the oceans, again measured in millions of tons. There's a bunch of other boundaries that they propose. I would say the three critical ones that we have exceeded are climate change, rate of biodiversity loss, and the nitrogen cycle levels. Others where we are still within the boundaries, I'm looking at the global freshwater use, where we are currently at 2,600 cubic kilometers per year versus 415 pre-industrial area, where they say the boundary is at 4,000. So there is still some room to grow, thank God. The quality of the water is going to be another issue. We know much about that. Change of land use, we're within boundaries. Ocean acidification, we are above the boundary proposed. We used to be even higher before in the pre-industrial area, and we are also getting towards where we need to get to in terms of the ocean depletion level. So the critical ones are climate change, rate of biodiversity, which is decreasing 10 times too fast, and the nitrogen cycle. These three things, future leaders of business, of organizations, of anybody having any willingness to act responsibly for this world in future, need to take into account. Now, what does that mean for how they take future decisions for their organizations? How are they going to make sure that when they take strategic decisions for their businesses, that these 10, but most importantly these 3 boundary rates boundaries are respected? That's what I believe we need to focus on when we educate our future leaders.